Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to have the children go back to the school. This week's Torah portion is Torah portion Terumah, offering, and it comes to us from Shemot, Exodus chapter 25, and it extends through Exodus chapter 27 and verse 19. Terumah. I want to give you a little recap of Torah Portia Yitro that we did a couple of weeks ago, where I was explaining how Moshe Rabbeinu went up to receive after the ratification of the Book of the Covenant. And we were really focusing on the Book of the Covenant, its blood ratification, and how that pertains to us in the Melchizedek priesthood. So this week's Torah portion now, there is a skip in the sequence of events. And that is where this week's Torah portion, Terumah, focuses on this skip in the sequence of events. Because what you'll notice now is that Torah isn't chronological. We've got this interruption from chapter 25 all the way through to chapter 32, when we get back into the narrative, and all of a sudden there's the golden calf incident. So what we're dealing between chapter 25 and 32 is that something happened. Terumah, an offering. We are going to look not at all the Levitical offerings that would go on in the sanctuary. Because as the sages that have gone before, and I believe many also would agree, I believe that the reason that Terumah, the offerings and all of the intricate detail of the sanctuary appears in our text right now is because Yahweh meant to dwell and make a house within the kingdom of priests, the Kadosh, the holy nation of Israel. He meant to build his dwelling in his people from the inside out, starting with the Ark, our Levim, our hearts. This is what the prophet Jeremiah spoke about in the 31st chapter and the 31st verse. But something happened. The golden calf incident. So Yahweh now, there's a skip in the sequence, and he literally, instead of coming and dwelling a tabernacle in the hearts of his people, he has to literally give Moshe the instructions for a physical tabernacle sanctuary. Because he couldn't dwell in their hearts, because they had sinned and fallen into golden calf worship within 40 days. Of receiving the covenant. So today I want to look at not the physical building, because in Yeshua we have been restored. He who to all the promises were given has come so that we can have life, Haim, and life more abundantly. So I think it would be a mistake for me to spend all of our time today looking at the construction of a physical temple, when ultimately he wants to reconstruct us as people, does he not? And how is he going to start? He's going to start the same way he started with me, with you, with all of us, is that he reached into my heart when I was 24 years old and convicted me of sin. And I made teshuvah, and the Ruach HaKodesh came in. I accepted Yeshua, and my life was transformed. Because of my outward behaviors, because of all of the things that were on the outside of the building? No, because he started the building from the inside out. And that's what we're going to look at today. It's a pattern of indwelling. It's how you really walk with Yeshua. How do we walk with him? From the inside out. And Yeshua spoke these words so powerfully to the religious leaders, and we need to speak these words to them today. Clean the inside of the cup. Clean the inside of our cups. It's so easy to look at everybody else and all of their failings, when ultimately it's my own failings, it's your own failings. So we're going to look at the building of the sanctuary, its furniture, and we're going to find out today what it's really about and why it appears in our text out of sequence. Terumah in the Hebrew is spelt Tav Resh Yod Mem He, Terumah. And of course the Mem speaks of water, Mayim, water. And the remaining letters really allude to Yah's Torah. The remaining letters allude to Yah's Torah because this is about drinking Yah's Torah down. That's what this Torah portion is, from the inside out. In Exodus, Shemot, chapter 24, verse 12, Moshe Rabbeinu was called up the mountain. And it's very important we understand what I'm about to say. The book of the covenant was blood ratified in Shemot, Exodus 24, before and solidified in Exodus 24, verse 11. You cannot add or annul to a blood ratified covenant. It would be like getting a land entrance deed. And the promise that was given to Abraham was what? A promise of land, was it not? And remember in Revelation chapter 5, there's a land entrance deed, and there is no one, Yochanan shouts, there's no one worthy to open up the scroll. And then finally he weeps and and realizes that it's Yeshua who is worthy to unseal the scrolls. And then we have the unsealing. That is a ratified covenant. Can you imagine if you had a scroll that was sealed, it's been ratified, and you decided then to break the seals and add a sentence to it? Could you do such a thing? No, you couldn't. It would nullify the contract, would it not? It would be broken. Likewise, if the book of the covenant was blood ratified and sealed and sprinkled, Shemot, Exodus 24:11. What happens in the preceding verse when Moshe Rabbeinu is called up the mountain and Yahweh says, and I will give you a law? Can it be an addition to a blood ratified book of the covenant? It has to be something distinctly separate. And here is the revelation. Moshe was called up the mountain as a Melchizedek, and he comes down to a Levitical reality. Because whilst he was up on the mountain, what were the children of Israel doing? They were feasting and partying at the golden calf. That's why we have the sequence from Exodus 25 through Shemot, Exodus 32. Even the sages recognize that the mitzvot for the sanctuary were given in this place thematically, not chronologically, because of the sin of the golden calf. Because Torah isn't chronological. And as I've been teaching about the book of the covenant, many people have brought this up, and it's been a stumbling block to the Melchizedek revelation. So before we even get into the teaching, I do need to address this because I believe it's going to help us all in discerning and understanding the scriptures. Torah is acronological, not chronological. Hebrews chapter 7 verse 11 testifies to this truth, stating that the book of the law was given under the Levitical priesthood, which was determined at the golden calf breach, was it not? The church taught that Torah progresses according to a chronological order in which the events of the 5 books of Moses took place. Whereas in yearly study of the Torah, it becomes apparent to me that the Torah is not chronological. It's achronological. There's a distinction. This interpretation allows for thematic considerations in the Torah to place certain parshas together. Even though each parsha may have been given at different times, you can place parshas side by side thematically. So when I prepare the week's teaching, I always have to differentiate between mitzvot, commandments, and narrative. And that's the distinction. As I'm going through each and every week, preparing the week's Torah cycle over the year, I look at the mitzvot, the commandments, and I look at the narrative. Now, the narrative is chronological. There was Abraham. Next in the chronology would be Isaac. Next would be Jacob. That makes sense. That is the narrative of Torah. But the mitzvot, the commandments, they're not necessarily in chronological order. That is achronological. And that is the distinction as I'm learning over the years. And that's a very important tool for you as you read the Torah week in and week out, hopefully. So to me, it's logical to assume that the ongoing narrative of Torah follows chronological order. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, obviously. But we may find, for instances, when a certain narrative concludes with details that took place many years later. For example, you get the story of the manna in Parsha Beshalach. Beshalach concludes with Yahweh's commandment to Moshe to place a sample of the manna next to the Aaron in the Ark of the Testimony. You can see this in Exodus chapter 16, verse 33. Place the manna next to the Ark of the Testimony. Shemot, Exodus 16, verse 33. But when was the Ark of the Testimony made? It didn't even exist back then. It wasn't made until Shemot, Exodus chapter 25. Where's your chronology? You see? But it's thematic because it's talking about, in that particular parsha, what is it talking about? It's talking about manna. And where would the manna go? So it is therefore that we must understand the distinction in the Torah. Because we live in a Torah of distinctions. It's not all run-on Torah. Let me give you another example. You see, this commandment could only have been given after the Ark of the Testimony was completed, an event that doesn't occur until many months and chapters later, in fact, like I said, chapter 25. But because the narrative deals with the manna, which first fell before the giving of the Torah, a related event, even though it takes place at a much later date, it can be included in that same parsha. And that's why it makes sense to put it in Parsha Beshalach. Now let's talk about the story of Judah and Tamar in Bereshit. It's another classic example of achronology. Since Tamar waited for Shelah to grow up, the second part of the story must have taken place at least 13 years later. And hence, after Joseph became viceroy in Egypt. If you recall, Joseph was sold when he was 17 years old, and he solved Pharaoh's dreams when he was 30 years old. So, when you see the end of the narrative about Judah and Tamar, this happened many, many years later. There isn't a chronological form in that text either. What about the mitzvot, the commandments in the Torah? In what order are they presented? Do they follow in chronological order or by the order in which they were given? Because the mitzvot are embedded within the narrative of Torah and are not presented in one unbroken unit, the answer is popularly known in the Hebrew as En Makdum Achar Ba-Torah. There is no chronological order in Torah according to the sages. Even Rashi, together with many other commentators, and including numerous midrashim, consistently hold to this principle in Makdum Uchar. That's a tough thing to say for me, but in the English, the Torah isn't written chronologically. The episode of the golden calf preceded the command, and this is my point, long-winded as it is, this is my point. The golden calf preceded the command to build the tabernacle as maintained by Rashi in his commentary on Shemot, Exodus chapter 31, verse 18. The tabernacle, listen, the tabernacle was never Yahweh's original intention, but rather a requirement which resulted from the sin of the golden calf. Again, the order of the Parsha in the Torah is determined by thematic connections and not necessarily a sequence in events. And that is the stumbling block to the Melchizedek priesthood. And that's why I had to address it before we even got into the teaching. Sorry it was long-winded, but I've had many commentators and many people who just get hung up on that. And I just wonder how much time we're spending in the Torah cycle that we can't see these things and go, well, hang on a minute. What about Exodus chapter 16? The manna next to the Ark of the Testimony, but that's not even until Exodus 20. It can't be in chronological order. So I guess my caution is, in our zeal for the Scripture, in our zeal for Yahweh, we can't be so prideful as to just go charging ahead as if we know it all. I certainly don't. For 2,000 years, believers in Yeshua haven't been studying Torah. We're not going to get this in 20 years. So let's not pretend that we know it all like the great sages, because they don't even know it all, because they don't know Yeshua. They're missing the greatest thing of all. So we are all learning, but we have to learn with a teachable ruach to be able to understand Revelation. And if we're going to hold and stick to the status quo, the Torah is in chronological order, then nothing I'm going to say from this point out will make any sense to you. You may as well switch me off. And that is what some people are doing. And that's okay. But as for me, I want to be teachable. And that means that we dig deep, we ask the tough questions, and we go in to the word of Yahweh with an openness to be taught. All of us, including myself. I get taught by you all often. Now let's look a little bit further. We see in Shemot, Exodus 20, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu is receiving instructions from Yahweh that get written down later. Or he gives a discourse to the people that are summarized briefly at the time and the details come later. And this is where I differ from Monty Judah in my understanding on this topic. If you look at the text of Shemot, Exodus chapter 19 and 20, you'll see that it says that there was the book was brought out and there was the ratification of the covenant. And later on, the writer of the book of Hebrews comes and gives some more description that if you actually go back to Exodus chapter 20, 19 and 20, you'll be like, oh, hang on a minute. And this is where I differ, like I said, in my understanding of this text, the Monty Judah. Because sprinkling procedures are reflected in differing accounts. What you have is Exodus, Shemot 24:6, and then you have Hebrews chapter 9, verse 18 and 22. Read them in your own time. But the procedure, the answer to this question or this debate that many people are having, I believe, is that the procedure used by Moshe Rabbeinu when he came down from the mount in Shemot, Exodus 24, is written down and described much later in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 5. That's where all the sprinkling procedures are described later. They don't have to spell it all out for us in one portion of the Torah. That's not how the Torah is written. That's how the writer of the book of Hebrews gives us much more information, because he's taking the volume of Torah after the revelation of Torah and he's speaking it out to the congregation in front of him. Because hindsight is 2020, right? The writer of the book of Hebrews understands from the whole volume of Torah the sequencing, whether it is thematic or whether it is mitzvot, and he's speaking it as revelation. Let me continue on a little further, because this is important. Additionally, the golden altar of incense, you'll notice it's skipped in Exodus, Shemot chapter 25, this week's Torah portion. Where is it? Where is it? And it's written down much later. Doesn't appear till 5 chapters later, Exodus, Shemot chapter 30. This is not linear storytelling. This is not linear storytelling like we were having every Sunday in the church. We've been set up for the fall because we've been so used to being spoon-fed. You've got a cross in the middle, and all of this happened before the cross, and all this happened after the cross. And that is the way many of us are trained to think when we open up the scriptures. But this is not linear storytelling. So we have to address these stumbling blocks before we can proceed even with this week's Torah portion. That's why I'm spending so much time on this introduction. It's acronological. The Torah isn't some modern kind of Western literature. You have to fight. You have to fight a bit to get the details together. You have to spend the time. You have to make it work. It won't be all in the same convenient place. Yahweh serving it up on a platter because what? He reveals the mystery to his Kedoshim. He doesn't want all the heathen to be able to know what's going on. He doesn't want the corrupt politicians in the New World Order to know what you and I know. So yes, we have to fight a bit for the text to make sense. And I'm glad that Yahweh's like that. I'm glad it's not in a nice chronological order so we can all go marching down the aisle together, happy clappy. And you know what? People want to fight over the silliest things. And I just don't want to. I just want to spend time with Yahweh's people in the Word, digging deep and looking at the wonderful mysteries of the Melchizedek. Because that's all that Yeshua brought forth for us, was a better and greater priesthood. Not made by the hands of men, but made and orchestrated from Yahweh above in the Shamayim. It's the Jerusalem above, not the Jerusalem that now is, as Paul says in the allegory of Hagar and Sarah. It's an amazing revelation. Another example of Acronological Torah is Parsha Lech Lecha, the death of Terach. That was Abraham's father. It's mentioned at the end of Parsha Noach, when in reality Terach was still alive when Abraham left for Eretz Canaan at age 75. Simple arithmetic will just bear that out if we spend the time. Another biblical literary technique that's employed, not only in the Torah, but is employed even more in the New Testament, is called telescoping. You telescope the narrative. It's a common Hebrew storytelling technique. Matthew does this, for example. If you read his account of the calling out and sending out of the apostles, it sounds like it all happened at once. But you read Mark and you read Luke, and they're actually two separate occasions. So what's happening? Matthew telescopes his writings, and what we see is Moshe Rabbeinu uses acronological writings and an acronological approach to Torah. So if we miss the telescoping of the writer of Matthew, and we miss Moshe Rabbeinu's acronological approach to Torah, we're going to miss the bus. We're going to miss the revelations. Because, like I say, this is not Greek literature or Western storytelling. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 5. Now we get into the teaching. Thank you for being so patient. Terumah. This is about the Mishkan, the construction of the tabernacle. But today we're going to focus that this construction is about you and me and him wanting to build us from the inside out. And he's going to start by Brit Milah Halev. It has to start there. That's the only place to start, is circumcision of the heart. The first piece of furniture Yahweh is interested in your body is not your biceps, is not your golden calves, but it is your lev, your heart. He wants to circumcise our heart. That is where he begins. And if you look at the Torah Parsha, what's the first piece of furniture that comes in? It's the ark, is it not? It's the construction of the ark of the testimony. That's your heart. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 5. Ivrim, we're going to be in Hebrews a lot, of course, because that is where you're going to get the 2020, the full revelation, because it's after the fact. Who serve as examples and shadow of heavenly things. As Moshe was admonished by Eloah when he was about to make the tent of meeting. For see, he said, that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. Ivrim, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 8. The way into the Makom Kadosh was not yet made manifest for believers while the first tent of meeting was still standing, which was a parable for the time then present. Selah. I mean, we can read right through that and get into the next verse. But what did the writer of the book of Hebrews just say? What you are reading in the Torah Parsha right now about the construction of the tabernacle, it doesn't manifest what? It does not manifest for believers the way into the holy place. It doesn't. It doesn't. You're going to be left standing outside looking in rather than being inside looking out. And that is religion. Religion and people that are not walking with Yahweh, they look on the outside and they look in trying to find the revelation. But those of us that have had the ark built from the inside out are looking inside and looking out. And looking out and seeing a whole different world and a whole different set of scriptures. I can't fight with you if you don't see it. If you're looking outside trying to look, I can't do it anymore. There are too many people that are on the inside that have legitimate revelation of the word looking out. And we're walking together. You see, time is short. There are thousands and thousands of websites, millions and millions of Facebook pages, millions and millions of ministries. If you're on the outside looking in, go join them. But if you're on the inside looking out, then we can maybe have some legitimate dialogue. You see, time is short. And the things that we're seeing, how hungry people are, is truly exciting to me. Truly exciting, is it not? It's amazing. Let's continue on in verse 10 of Hebrews. It was a parable, brethren, for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that would not make the one that did the service perfect regarding his conscience, which stood only in food offerings and drink offerings and different washings and carnal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. The book of the law, Exodus chapter 20 verse 12, was imposed upon Israel with its carnal ordinances, its washings and its ceremonial Levitical orderings until the time of Reformation. And if you don't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah and that he came and is the one of the until, then it would make sense that you would continue on in the ceremonial washings. But I believe, it's just me, I believe that Yeshua is the one that came and now life is distinctly different. But that's my testimony. It may not be yours, and that's okay. But this is what I believe. And that's why I'm here, to teach you what I truly believe. And I pray that we would all seek and search these things out together. And this is where the narrative now continues in the 11th verse. But Mashiach has now come, has become a Kohen Hagadol, a high priest of Tov things to come, by a greater and more perfect tent of meeting, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation. And this is the epitome of our Torah Parsha, Terumah. What am I teaching today? What is all of this narrative all about? It is about Yeshua has come as a high priest of good things to come by a greater and more perfect tent of meeting, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation. Neither by the dam, the blood of goats and calves, but by his own dam he entered in once into the Kadosh Ha-Kedoshim, having obtained eternal Gelulah, redemption for us. For if the dam of bulls and goats and the ashes of a red heifer, the sprinkling, the defiled sets apart the flesh, how much more? How much more shall the dam, the blood of Mashiach, who through the eternal Ruach offered himself without blemish to Eloah, purify your conscience from dead works to serve the living Eloah. I believe that the book of the law is a dead work that our conscience is purified from so that we can now serve the living Eloah in covenant Torah. And for this cause, he was the mediator of the Brit Hadashah. He was the mediator of a new covenant. It doesn't say he was a mediator of a new law. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu was the mediator of what? He basically mediated the book of the law because Yahweh was going to slaughter mass genocide on the whole of Israel because of the golden calf. But Moshe Rabbeinu mediated, and Yahweh gave them an imposed, not agreed to set of carnal commandments that were imposed upon them until the time of Reformation when he, Mashiach, would come. But Yeshua mediates something far greater, a new covenant, a Brit Hadashah. It's a new covenant. It's not a new law. It's covenant Torah. And that's exactly what the prophet Jeremiah taught us. And it would be constructed from the heart all the way out. And if you have been born again in Yeshua, then that's your testimony. Because it didn't start any other way by him reaching in and grabbing your heart. That's the only way. Doesn't matter if you're in the church, if you're on the street, or if you're in the mosque. Because there are many people that are even being saved right now, Palestinians. Which aren't Palestinians, they're in fact Jews. But that's another subject. I think we briefly touched on that last week. It's all topsy-turvy. Let's continue on. And for this cause, verse 15, he is the mediator of a Brit Hadashah by means of his death for the Gelulah, the redemption of the sins that were done in the first Brit, so that those who are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. This is the covenants of promise. This is the covenants of promise. For where there is a will is presented, it shows the death of its maker. For a will is in force only after men are dead. Otherwise it is useless while its maker lives. For this reason, not even the first book of the covenant will was dedicated without blood. And then we see now the revelation gets even deeper. If you turn to Hebrews chapter 7, verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, there is made a necessity, a change also of the Torah. And that sticks in a lot of people's craw. There's a change in the Torah. There's a change in the Torah. Verse 16 of chapter 7, Melchizedek is made not after the law of the carnal commandment. It's not after the law that was imposed, the book of the law, or a carnal commandment. Verse 18, there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before for the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. It's not a disannulling to lawlessness, as the church would teach, but it's a disannulling to covenant Torah, so that you would live covenant Torah, not Levitical imposed. And then finally we see in verse 19, for the law made nothing perfect. Well, the covenant did actually make things perfect, but the book of the law didn't make anything perfect. I mean, David talks about Yahweh's covenant Torah is perfect. But the book of the law, the blood of bulls and goats, it's not perfect. So there is a division and a rightly dividing point of Torah which has to be addressed. 2 Timothy 2:15. That's what I'm trying to do. Now we go back to Shemo, Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8. And let them make me a kadosh place, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you after the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the instruments of it, even so shall you make it. So all of the instruments within the tabernacle, they are going to be a revelation to what Yahweh is doing inside of your body. That's what they're to be there for. Moshe was carrying the blueprints, if you will. And this is the meaning of Yeshua's words, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The blueprints would come down and Yahweh would make you the tabernacle. Acts 15, the rebuilding of the fallen tabernacle of David. He's not talking about wood. He's talking about you. Sticks, trees, joined together in the hand of Yeshua. Let's look at the Mishkan and the Ohel in the Hebrew. Ohel means the overhanging tent apparatus, and Mishkan means what lifts up the structure. What lifts up the structure. And we have a new covenant, which is what? The lifting back up of a structure that was fallen. The root of Ohel is the Hebrew word achal, and it means to radiate or to shine forth what our eyes would behold. The revelation of the Melchizedek. The building block, Mishkan, if we look at Mishkan, is shakan, and it means to dwell or to remain. And it's interesting if we find this word where it first is mentioned in the scripture, Mishkan or shakan, where would you think this dwelling place would appear? Bereshit chapter 3, Genesis chapter 3, verse 23. Therefore, Yahweh Elohim sent him out of Gan Eden, Adam, to work the ground from where he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed, the Hebrew word there, of course, means to shakan, the Hebrew word shakan, from Mishkan. He placed at the east of Gan Eden cherubim, and a flaming sword that turned in every direction to guard the way back to the Etz Chaim, to the tree of life. Man is driven out of the Garden of Eden, and Yahweh shakan, he placed a malach, an angel. Yahweh caused a malach, an angel, to dwell right there. And in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan, where does Yahweh dwell? Where does Yahweh shakan? Between two cherubim. You see? I mean, it's amazing. So this is telling us what Yahweh wants to do with us. Build us from the inside out. He's got to build us from the inside out. Shakan also means neighbor. It means neighbor, because Yahweh has always chosen to dwell or remain with his creation, and to truly experience Yahweh's dwelling, we have to love our neighbor. This isn't rocket science. It's in the simple things that you truly see Yahweh's people. How can you say that Yahweh dwells in you if you don't love your neighbor? How can you say that Yahweh dwells in you when that stuff comes out of your mouth, and when you sit behind a keyboard and you type that stuff? How can you say that Yahweh dwells in you? You're not even loving your neighbor. I don't have time for the religious trash. It's poison. I never liked it. I never liked it. I never liked it. 24 years old, being unchurched and walking into a church freaked me out. Because I looked around and I was like, where's Yeshua? These people have been here all their life. Have they actually met him? And then you'd see another brother and another sister who were on fire. And guess what? He plucked them out of the dreadful circumstances of life and brokenness too. And it's in the brokenness that you find Yeshua, not in the pride. It's from the least of us. It's in the brokenness. But the pomp and the Pharisees and the religious leaders, they're not built from the inside out, but they're the ones that control the strings. It's amazing. We continue on. Sorry, off on a tangent there again. Let's talk about the Kadosh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies, of course, was and is the heart of man. If we think the Holy of Holies is about a piece of real estate, it's about the real estate inside you and I. That is the Kadosh HaKadoshim. It's supposed to be. But in its natural state, it is deceitfully wicked above all things. That Yahweh can't dwell there. But the only way he can dwell there if there is a shedding of blood, right? And a covering. And he performs circumcision of the heart. There's a shedding of blood. And then Yeshua can come and dwell inside of you. But there's nothing going on in that heart until there's a shedding of blood of the heart. Because it's evil and despicably wicked above all things in its natural state, is it not? Oh, I mean, this is about what the tabernacle is about. Does that make any sense? Good. Okay. So the Kadosh place, the holy place, that is the mind or the soulish area. We're to be in the world, but not of the world. So oftentimes when we're at work, yeah, we have stepped out maybe of the Holy of Holies, and we have to deal with the world, but we're still in the holy place. But it is a soulish realm. It's definitely more carnal. But it's still a place in preparation for you to go back into that inner sanctuary. And we have to remember that. And it's okay to go out to the holy place. It is the soulish realm. It is the soulish realm. It is where we dwell in the mind. And then we have the court. We can go on out to the court. We can go and we look and we live in the body. That's the body realm, the physical realm. You've got to take care of the court. You've got to sweep the court. You've got to look after the court. But you don't want to be so focused on the court that you don't spend time in the Kadosh HaKadoshim. But you don't want to neglect the court, because if the court becomes broken, then you won't even be able to have access because you'll die. So we've got to look after the body because it's what we dwell in, right? You see, this is all a picture for us. There's only room for one thing in the Kadosh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. It cannot be divided, and we cannot have a divided heart. We cannot have a divided heart. There's only one person that is permitted to enter into our heart. That is the Kohen HaGadol. That's Yeshua HaMashiach. He's the only one that's allowed in there. And if we have a divided heart, he's not in there. Does that make sense? Let's look at the Terumah, the title of this week's Torah portion. Let's look at it in the Brit Hadashah. Terumah, an offering. Turn with me to Romans chapter 11, verse 16, and we find Terumah in the Brit Hadashah. For if the first fruit is kadosh, the lump, now this of course is referring to Numbers chapter 15, verse 18, the Heave offering. The lump is also kadosh. And if the root is kadosh, so are the netzarim. So are the branches. That's you. What's this talking about? This is talking about the Heave offering. This is talking about taking the harvest and grinding that harvest into bread. Then you would take a chunk, just a small chunk of that bread, and that piece of bread represents what? It represents the whole harvest that was brought in. And then that little piece, it's lifted up before Yahweh as an offering, as a terumah, an offering, and that one piece being offered as a sacrifice sanctifies the whole harvest. The whole harvest. Yeshua came in the flesh so that he would represent and sanctify all of us. The one piece sanctifies the whole harvest. Yeshua was lifted up as our terumah, our offering. And it says that in Yochanan, John chapter 12, verse 24, the Son of Man must be lifted up because he represents us all. Sanctifies the whole lump, the whole harvest, that one small piece. It means to give willingly, or in the Hebrew nadav, to do it in freedom or to do it from a flow within you. And when we give, we should do it from the flow within us. True freedom comes from continuing, I believe, in Yahweh's book of the covenant, which is Torah from the inside out. It's not Torah from the outside in. Torah from the outside in is book of the law. Torah from the inside out is circumcised heart Torah. It's different. It's totally different. And you can see it in Yahweh's people. I'm telling you. This congregation has transformed over the past decade with people because Yahweh's transforming the teaching that's coming out of here because he's transforming all of us. Because it's an inside-out work. It's an inside-out work. If we build it from the heart, Yahweh will come and dwell within it. It's a promise to us. It's a promise. It's a pattern. The Hebrew word for pattern is tavenit, pattern, or likeness, or figure. And its root is banah. It means a building plan, and it's the root for son. You see, the pattern is from the heavenlies, and we're to be built in the likeness of his Son. The Son must be followed according to Yahweh's pattern, not some pattern of man's invention. And that is where there's the division. Let's look at this ark that appears in our Torah portion in Shemot, Exodus chapter 25 and verse 10. Of course, within the ark, we had the three things: the jar of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and of course, the tablets of the testimony. Ark, the Hebrew word for ark, is Aaron, and the root of that is Arah. It means a gathering, the testimony or gathering place of the word of Yahweh. And for any good to come out of our life, where does Yahweh's word have to gather? In our mind? You see, if Yahweh's word gathers in our heart, it will actually change our mind, and it will change our senses. I mean, I used to like, when I was unredeemed, the smell of bacon. Now, don't look at me all like holy, like, oh my, I'm not coming here anymore. I did, okay? But Yahweh's heart, word came into my heart, and I understood through his word that it is an abomination. And from his word settling in my heart, it changed my mind. So I made different decisions when I went to the grocery store. Now, it's actually changed my senses that I want to puke when I smell bacon. My senses have changed because my heart was changed by his word. His word settled in my heart, it changed my mind, and it's changed my senses. That's crazy. That's crazy stuff. Am I the only one here? Okay, all right. Just one of I'm wondering if you guys are all right. My poor wife, she lost a good friend about 8 years ago. She didn't die or anything, the friend. My wife went out for breakfast with her friend. And her friend orders bacon. And my wife, we were, it must have been a decade ago. My wife, of course, she'd been listening to me. She said, "You know what? That is an abomination." And this Christian girl was like, they've been friends for years. She's like, "That is an abomination. Yahweh says that is an abomination. And you're defiling the temple." They never hung out again. Never. And then Tamara's like, I'm not going to do it the way you do. You just like a bull in a china shop. There must have been a better way of speaking. I'm like, yeah. It didn't really work that way. It's true. Let's get back into the word, for crying out loud. Matthew. Aaron. We were looking at Aaron, the gathering place of the word of Yahweh in our heart. Aaron in the feminine is the bearer of the word of Yahweh, is always feminine. Aaron, it's a feminine word. The ark is a feminine word. The word of Yahweh is pictured in Hebrew as being housed in a feminine container where it would be kept, protected, and nurtured. Miriam housed and kept and protected and nurtured the word of Yahweh and was blessed among women, was she not? The heavenly structure shown to Moshe will take upon flesh, and Shakan dwell amongst us. And women, that's why you're so wonderful and precious to Yahweh. Because some of us bull in a china shop men, we just need to listen to the sensitivity of the women around us when Yahweh puts his word in your hearts. I want to thank all of the women right here and your witness, each and every one of you. When I get to visit and talk with you, I need to hear it. Season, singing, Eunice, so many of you, because the sensitivity of you ladies, it ministers sometimes to us men that are a little bit, Brother John in the back, Jeremy. Yeah, I see you ducking. We need that. Because Yahweh, He works in that sensitivity. And that's why He brings us together as a body in Yeshua. Let's look at the umbrella thorn or the acacia that builds this very ark. In the Hebrew, it's called shittim, the shittim tree, or Israeli bamboo. Israeli bamboo. The acacia tree is used in the construction of the Mishkan, the Tabernacle, and the Bet HaMikdash, the temple, and the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the gum from the acacia thorn may have been used, I believe it was, to pitch the ark, to pitch Noah's ark. And what was Noah's ark? It was a vessel of salvation, was it not? You see, the acacia thorn tree is used for either healing, medicinal purposes for the land, or for people. It can be used for weapons to cause bleeding and pain, destruction and judgment, or even used for decorations, for art. You can even use it for basket weaving. So now you're going to see this Israeli bamboo or this acacia or shittim wood appear throughout Scripture, sometimes as a weapon, an instrument for bleeding, sometimes in basket weaving, and sometimes it's going to be used in medicinal healing throughout the Scripture. And if you track it, it's absolutely fascinating. Let me give you a couple of examples. Thorns grow to more than 2 inches in length. And those of you that have been to Israel, if you go to En Gedi, I remember picking a branch off, nearly got arrested by the Israeli Antiquities Department because I wanted to put it in my suitcase because I thought, oh, this is great. It had like 2 inches thorns up on En Gedi. They've got the acacia trees up there. It's the only tree up there that you can get some sun, some shade from the sun when you're on a tour. So I remember going in there and having a look around and poking about, no pun intended. But anyway, so these thorns grow 2 inches in length. They can pierce and trap an animal, or they can stop a man dead in his tracks. But there's another use for the acacia thorn. You see that Sefer Torah right there? That is actually scratched. It's marked in lines with an acacia thorn. So then when you actually write the Sofarim, when he writes out the Torah, he's following the scratched line made by the acacia thorn on the sheepskin. Because obviously you wouldn't want to draw lines on a nice sheepskin Torah. The acacia thorn used to catch a ram. Placed on the baker's head when he was hung on a tree. Remember the baker? He had an acacia thorn basket on his head and he was hung on a tree. The only way Joseph was set free from captivity was by the death of the bread man on a tree encircled by acacia thorns on his head and the elevation of the wine bearer to a royal position at the right hand of rule. I'm going home. I mean, crying out loud. I mean, there's the whole gospel story there, right? And we're just talking about acacia thorns. I mean, Yahweh's word, when it settles in your heart, it is amazing, isn't it? Starts coming out of your senses. It was placed over sheep's pens at night. John chapter 10, verse 8, excuse me. It was used to crown Mashiach Yeshua. The acacia tree grows very deep roots. It draws nourishment from the deep earth, and it survives very well in dry ground. This tree is not attractive. It's not like the cedars of Lebanon. It's not like the sycamore tree. In the Septuagint, shittim is translated as apathrotos, or incorruptible. Incorruptible. So the ark would be made from a tree. Let's just look at this. This is the ark, going back to our Torah portion. The ark is made from a tree that has roots that grow from dry ground Isn't that what Isaiah, the prophet, says? 53. For he shall grow up before him like a tender plant and a root out of dry ground. It's going to be a very unattractive tree. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. The tree is translated as incorruptible. Hebrews chapter 7 verse 26. For such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and made higher from the heavens. It's the undefiled and incorruptible Yeshua. Let's look at gold and wood, because this ark would be housed with what? You'd see the gold on the wood. Now, the Egyptians, they had this process by which gold could actually be injected into the wood to make the gold and wood one. The wood would become cloaked in gold. Now, gold speaks of what? Deity. And wood speaks of humanity. So deity would be cloaked in humanity. You see, this week's Torah portion is all about Yeshua and how he's interacting with his people. The ark, the word of Yahweh, is to be the very heart of Yahweh's people, and it's to lead us. The ark is central because the ark was what would rise up first and the people would follow. And if anybody's going to listen to anything we have to say, it's because what comes out of our then they will follow. By your fruit we shall know. It's very sobering, isn't it? Let's talk about witnessing. Because the word of Yahweh is under the shadow of his wings. The testimony under the chevarim, the cherubim. The testimony, the Hebrew word there for testimony is edut, and it means to witness. To witness. Witnessing is threefold. It's one, sharing Yeshua's substance. Two, it's sharing his covenant Torah. And three, it's sharing his priestly authority. That's truly witnessing. The 10 words are actually a witness to the book of the covenant Torah. You see, the heart is where Yahweh resides. Originally, that heart was in the Garden of Eden, in the Holy of Holies, which was the dust of the Garden of Eden, where man was created from. This is where Yahweh taught Adam all of his mitzvot. And what flowed out of the Garden of Eden, if that's the heart, what flowed out of the Garden of Eden, which is the Holy of Holies, which is the Ark, which is the heart? How many rivers? 4 rivers flowed out. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and it became into 4 heads. And it says in the scripture, he that believes on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his heart shall flow rivers of Maim Haim, living water. How many rivers? How many rivers flow out of our heart? 4 rivers. We've got the mitral, the tricuspid, the aortic, and the pulmonary. That's how many. Because Yahweh's showing us right there. It's to flow out of our hearts. O generation of vipers, Matthew 12:34. How can ye, being of evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Tehillim, Psalm 40, verse 8. I delight to do thy will, O my Elohim. Yea, thy Torah is within my heart. And Yehezkel 36, verse 26. A new heart also will I give you, and a new ruach will I put within you. And I will take away your stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh, and I will put my ruach within you, and cause you to walk in my hukim, my statutes, and you shall keep my mitzvot, and do them. You see, when the heart is fully circumcised, it's made clean by the word of Yahweh. Only then can we actually say no to sin. Only then. Thy word I have hidden in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. You see, freedom never came from release or abandonment from Yahweh's Torah, of Yahweh's Torah. But freedom comes by obedience to Yahweh's Torah. But we need to be obedient to his covenant Torah. You see, Satan will contradict this basic biblical truth, and religion will be the front man for this teaching that freedom comes from the abandonment of commandments. No, it doesn't. But we are to rightly divide the word of Torah to really enable his commandments to dwell in our heart from the inside out. If we don't rightly divide his word, we'll be trying to replicate religious law commandments from the outside in. And that's the distinction. In a decade in the Hebrew and Messianic movement, I've looked around and I said, where is all the faith? There was more faith with the brethren back in the church. Yeah, they were lawless. And I'm wondering, where is the faith? Where's the fire? Where's the passion? Oh, we're passionate about being self-righteous. We're passionate about being right. But I'm talking about the anointing. You see, replicating religious behavior from the outside in, replicating laws and commandments from the outside in, that isn't the fruit of covenant Torah. You got to build it from the inside out. If you were more concerned about the length of your heart than the length of your tzitzit, then Yahweh would be doing well in you. You see, but we're more concerned about our outward appearance than our inward appearance. And that's what has to change. Judge me, please, by my outward appearance. But I would rather you judge me by what comes from within. Because ultimately that's character, is it not? Is it not? So we continue on. Hebrews chapter 7 verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law. The book of the covenant was not given when there was any Levites and Levitical priesthood going on. The book of the covenant was given in Exodus chapter 19. But the book of the law was given at the sin of the golden calf. There is the break in the narrative of this week's text. That's why it's out of sequence. That is why we've got chapter 25 to chapter 32. We've got the Mishkan and all the furniture out of sequence because of this verse explains it succinctly. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under the Levitical priesthood the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should arise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called after the order of Aaron? It's amazing. Let's continue on with this furniture. Let's look at the menorah in our text. In Shemot, Exodus chapter 25, verse 31. And you can tie this menorah. It's built by the prophet Isaiah in the 11th chapter and the 2nd verse. And remember, of course, the menorah, as we have seen, it's got the 6 branches with the center branch, the center column. 6 branches coming off the center column for a total of 7 bulbs or lights. But now, reading Hebrew, of course, from right to left, we can build a menorah right here in Isaiah 11, chapter 2. The Ruach HaKodesh of Yahweh will rest upon him, upon that central branch or that central Yarek. So the Ruach rests upon the center column. Then, from right to left, we have the Ruach of Chokmah, Binah, the Ruach of counsel and might, the Ruach of Da'at, knowledge, and the fear of Yahweh. There's your menorah right there. Amazing. And you shall make him a quick binar in the fear of Yahweh. The menorah, even when Yeshua was crucified, it was a menorah. There was on the tree. You've got a tree because Yeshua and the thieves were nailed to a tree, singular, it says in the Brit Hadashah. You've got 6 arms up around a central yarek. You have a menorah. You've got the middle shaft, which is the eretz, the tree. And then you've got thigh, loins, and body. That's what yarek means. It means thigh, loins, or body. And it always troubled me, you know. It's like Yeshua is crucified between 2 thieves, but the Roman comes along, breaks this thief's legs. Oh, we'll skip you, Yeshua. Then we'll go over here, and then we'll break this thief's legs. But how about this? Yeshua's on a tree with 6 arms up around the tree, 6 branches up, and the single tree, which is the yarek. And then what happens? The Roman moves from the first thief, which is crucified on the northeast part of the tree, breaks his legs, moves round to the southeast part of the tree, breaks his legs, and then moves around to the westerly part of the tree where Yeshua is facing the eastern gates and doesn't break his legs. He's just working himself around the tree. A menorah. And what do you do with a menorah? You're supposed to light the menorah. And did they want to light the tree that Yeshua was crucified on? Of course they did. How do you cleanse the land? Possessions or things that are touched by the accursed. If you look at it in the Torah, you burn them. What happened to the golden calf? It was ground down and burned. What happened to Achan? You see the burning. So the tree of punishment was itself to be burned along with the accursed. If you look at Joshua 7, verse 15. You see, the authorities full well intended to burn the tree down with the accursed on it. Except if it hadn't have been for the intercession of Joseph of Arimathea. They full on planned to burn Yeshua's body because in Ivrim, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, the tree was even reckoned accursed. It was reckoned a shame because it had been touched by the accursed. Had it not been for Joseph of Arimathea, Yeshua would have also been burned up along with the tree. And this is exactly what the prophet Jeremiah says in the 11th chapter and the 9th verse. Listen to this. But I was like a lamb or an ox that is brought to the slaughter. And I knew not what they had devised devices against me, saying, let us destroy the tree along with the fruit. Yeshua is the fruit, is he not? That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to burn the tree of Yeshua. And let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name may no more be remembered. It's a menorah. Romans 11 talks about the menorah, the branches, whether they're wild or whether they're natural. They're to graft into the yarek, the body, the shemesh, the servant light, or the master. The innermost sanctuary, the heart is dark. It is very dark. And there is only one light that is permitted in our heart. If you look at the almond buds, they're called shakad. It means to watch, to be alert, or to be sleepless. And those that are grafted into the yarek will by nature, what are we going to be? We're going to be watchful. We're going to be alert. We're going to be sleepless because we're awaiting for the shemesh, the servant light, to come, are we not? You see, to be in darkness is idiomatic in its expression, means not to walk in Torah. If you're in the darkness, you're not walking in Torah. If you're in the light, you're walking in Torah. But it's rightly dividing what part of the Torah to walk in. It's got to be Melchizedek covenant Torah. And those wicks, they're to burn bright. But those wicks, how long do they burn? For a short time. Ever lighted a wick? Yeah, they burn bright, but they only burn for a short time. It's the oil. It's the oil in the bowls that allows the wicks to illuminate the night watches of the high priest. And that's why we have got to get more of that Ruach HaKodesh, more of the oil in our bowls, because that's what's going to keep it all alight longer and longer and longer. You can't just depend upon the wicks. You've got to have that pressing of the Ruach HaKodesh. And then you have these flowers on the menorah, and they're called in the Hebrew perah. Perah means a blossom, a flower to produce. But in the Septuagint, I love it, they're actually called lilies. The flowers on the menorah are called lilies. So now you understand what Yeshua was saying when he said, and why do you fixate on your clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say to you that even Shlomo, in all of his Tifereth, was not dressed like one of these. Therefore, if Yahweh so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the fireplace, shall he not much more clothe you, O you of little emunah? And then in Luke chapter 4 verse 16, and he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and according to his practice, he went into the synagogue on Shabbat. And he stood up and he read, and there was delivered to him the scroll of the prophet Yeshayahu. And when he had opened the scroll, he found the place where it was written. This is a menorah right here in this text. Because Yeshua would have stood on a central raised platform called a bema. And with 3 shamashim on each side. There would have been 3 elders on this side and 3 elders on that side. And Yeshua would have been on the raised bema. He would be the what? The yarek, the central branch. Again, when he spoke these very words, he formed a menorah. The Ruach of the Master Yahweh is upon me. Isn't that just what Isaiah said in the 2nd verse of chapter 11? He says the same thing. The Ruach, the light, I am the light. The Ruach of the Master Yahweh is upon me because he has anointed me, the anointing of the menorah, to proclaim the Besorah to the poor, not to the proud, but to the poor, to the brokenhearted, because Yahweh is going to circumcise that heart first of all, and he's going to build that tabernacle from the inside out. Oh my goodness gracious me. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim deliverance to the captives and the recovering of the sight to the blind, to set at liberty those that are bruised, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Master Yahweh. And he rolled up the scroll, and he gave it to the Shemesh and sat down, and the eyes of all of those that were in the synagogue were glued on him. And he began to say to them, this day the Katuv is fulfilled in your ears. That's the menorah. I'm nearly finished, but I want to touch on the linen curtains because I love the linen curtains. This is actually linen right here. I am wearing a t-shirt underneath. My wife said, you better wear a t-shirt underneath that thing. But maybe not when I go to the beach. Linen, Shemot chapter 26, verse 1 through 6. What we see with these linen curtains is we see the colors. We see blue in the Hebrew techelet. We see purple, which is poiphorus. I like that. Poiphorus. What's your name? My name's Poiphorus. And then we see scarlet, kokenios. Sounds very Greek, doesn't it? It's not. It's Hebrew. So look at the colors. Techelet, poiphorus, and kokenios. We've got blue, purple, and scarlet. Matthew chapter 27, verse 28. Blue means techelet. It represents holiness or divinity. Scarlet is sometimes translated as crimson or the worm of shining. because that's how they would get the dye. Iyov, Job chapter 25. How much less man that is a worm, and the Ben Adam who is a worm. You see, the worm represents what? Unredeemed man. The worm represents unredeemed man. Red or blood color of crimson from the worm, Adam, Dam, earthly or ruddy man, which is where we get blood, Dam. Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 1 verse 18. Come now and let us reason together, says Yahweh. Though your sins are as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall be as wool. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the tov, the good of the land. Blue and red are primary colors, each one containing no other colors or mixture colors. As they stand, they are forever separate. They're forever separate. But there is one color, and this is the secret in the Brit Hadashah. But there is one color that stands between blue, Yahweh, divinity, and red, man, ruddy man, bloody man. And what is that color? What is that color? Poiphorus. Poiphorus, purple, is what stands between Yahweh's divinity and man's bloody ruddiness. It's poiphorus. And now the mystery of the Brit Hadashah. In every mention of these three colors, purple is always between the two. It's a combination of blue, divinity, and scarlet, man. You see, divinity and blood bring forth intercession. Poiphorus is the intercession that is made by the mediator between Yahweh and man. You have to have the poiphorus, the purple. That's why it's always between the two. Yochanan chapter 19 verse 2. Then Pilate therefore took Yeshua and scourged him, and the soldiers wove a keter, a crown of acacia wood, the Israeli bamboo of thorns, which is what the ark was made out of, and they put it on his head, and they put on him a poiphorus, or a purple robe, and said, Hail, Melech of the Yahudim! Melech of the Yahudim! And they smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again and said to them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Yeshua forth, wearing a keter, a crown of thorns, and a purple poiphorus robe. And then Pilate said to them, Behold, Adam, the man. You see, this is the sod, is in Yochanan chapter 19 verse 2 and Matthew chapter 27 verse 28. Yeshua arrives at Pilate's court in Techelet. He arrives in Pilate's court in Techelet. Now, the sages will tell you at the rebellion of Korah that Korah arrived before Moshe Rabbeinu and the priesthood, all dressed in Techelet. Because Torah portion Korah comes on the heels of the instruction of the seat, which is Techelet. So the sages have devised over the years that Korah's rebellion is that he came right before the princes of Israel. He came fully dressed in Techelet because he was about to challenge the what? The priesthood. Well, if I am wearing all Techelet, then I don't need to keep the commands of the seat, for I am the seat. And he challenged the priesthood. That's the traditional teaching of Torah portion Korah. But Yeshua arrives at Pilate's court in Techelet, because it's all about challenging the priesthood legitimately. Korah was he was illegitimate. Yet Yeshua arrives to challenge the priesthood legitimately. And does he triumphantly prevail? Yes, because Caiaphas rips his garment and he voids his priesthood, thus bringing in the full Melchizedek priesthood. So Yeshua then comes to Pilate's court in Techelet, appearing all in Techelet, challenging the priesthood. Only Yeshua has the legitimate right to challenge the Levitical priesthood and appear all in Techelet. He appears in Techelet because what he's actually doing is he's claiming his divinity. And did he claim his divinity right there before Caiaphas? He did. And that's why Caiaphas tore his garment, because Yeshua proclaimed his divinity and he demonstrates his divinity. But then Adam, or ruddy, bloody mankind, does what? He rejects his claim. And his garments turn what? They turn from Techelet into scarlet, or kokonios. Look at Matthew 27, verse 28. His garments change color. His garments change color. And later, as the mediator, as his redemptive plan unfolds, his garments change color again to poiphorus in John chapter 19, verse 2. Because he's interceded between divinity and ruddy man. He is now interceded, and he is the center Yerek. He is the ark. He is the light. He is the one that redeems. Yahweh brings man into redemption with Yahweh. He brings blue Techelet and scarlet, ruddy, bloody man, and it is the purple that was always between the two. It's right there in the linen curtains. And that explains the narrative of the Brit Hadashah that people have struggled with for centuries. And it goes back to understanding the Torah. Purple is always between blue and red. Scarlet and Techelet. Always. Because it's the intercession that Yahweh built in from the beginning. Blood touches Techelet. Red touches blue. Humanity reaches out in faith to divinity, and mediation occurs and redemption unfolds. A pattern of indwelling from the inside. Matthew chapter 9, verse 20. And see, a woman who was diseased with an issue of blood for 12 years came behind him. And what did she reach out for? She reached out for the Techelet. So then when she reached out of the Techelet, what happened? Her readiness turned poiphorus, and she was redeemed. Right there. Right there. She touched the seat of his garment, for she said within herself, if I might just touch his seat, I shall be redeemed. Poiphorus, purple, the intercession between blue and red. You see, purple is a sign of being made one with Messiah. Or for want of a better word, it's being plunged into Messiah. And that's a dying term. Mikvah in Hebrew is a dying term where different colors are immersed and a new color is born. That's amazing. So within this week's Torah portion, there is so much. I could just continue to go on, but for sake of time, I just don't think I can. I've gone on quite a lot. But I want to just explain that the importance, brethren, the importance of looking at this week's Torah portion, Terumah, is that we would truly be built from the inside out. That Yahweh would lay out these instructions on the tabernacle, not because he's interested in an outward building, but interested in the building of his people. And that there would never have been a tabernacle, an earthly tabernacle, an earthly tent of meeting, if there wasn't the sin of the golden calf. That's why it's out of sequence and placed in acronological, not chronological, but acronology. Because Yahweh truly wanted from the beginning to have a Melchizedek covenant priesthood and dwell within his people from the heart inside out. And our only hope is to be plunged into Yeshua. Ruddy man has to connect with divinity so that we can be poiporous, that we can be purple. We can literally change color, change nature, and that change in the heart will change our mind, and it'll even change our senses. It will even change our senses. May Yahweh bless you. Questions, comments, anybody at all? Yes.
Matthew, are all 7 feasts applicable in the Book of the Covenant?
Excellent question. I'd love to address that if I could fully in depth next Shabbat, because we are actually going to talk about the Moedim. And when you look at the Moedim, you're going to see that the 3 annual feasts are mentioned in the Book of the Covenant, and those are, and still today, even in the book of the law, those are the 3 pilgrimage feasts that you are required as males to go to. So that doesn't change. But how we approach the Moedim, that is distinctly different in the book of the Covenant Torah. And the one that's going to give the answer to that is, of course, going to be the prophet Yehezkel, Ezekiel. And he'll address that, and we'll look into this next week.
Can you give a simple explanation in regards to circumcision, how it relates to the Book of the Covenant and the Book of the Law?
Circumcision, yes. Circumcision in the Book of the Covenant was a token sign entrance into the covenant. But once the covenant was broken, then there would be no point circumcising into a broken covenant. Why would you have the entrance sign into a broken covenant? So therefore, hence, that's why the children of Israel weren't circumcised for 40 years until Joshua 5. Why would they circumcise into a sign into a broken covenant? Then in Joshua 5, in the book of the law, circumcision is a land entrance sign. You see, so Judaism is still teaching that circumcision is a sign into a broken covenant. It's not. Circumcision today is a land entrance sign, Joshua 5. That's why the prophet tells you that if you're going to go into the land and go up to the temple of Yahweh, you need to be circumcised in heart and in flesh. But the entrance covenant sign of Yeshua is what? Circumcision of the Ark. Yeah. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Many questions, and Shabbat Shalom. But join us next week and we'll dig into the Moedim, the Feast of Yahweh in the Book of the Covenant, and of course, I'm sure some more stuff as well. I can't see up here, it's so bright. I feel like an angel.